On this week's episode, I'm excited to bring on Susie Hayes as a guest. Susie is a psychotherapist, certified hypnotist, certified sex therapist, certified life coach, certified business coach, author, and speaker. She's the author of the book Freed from Stuck, where she shares her 5-step method to cross the bridge beyond grief, trauma, and self-sabotage to discover lasting change now. Susie helps her clients access internal resources they never knew they had to create what they never knew they could through coaching, counseling, and hypnosis. Introducing award-winning author of the book Freed from Stuck, Susie Hayes. Welcome to the Vijay Kaila Show, everyone. On today's episode, I'm excited to have Susie Hayes join us. Susie, welcome.
Thank you. It's a delight. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
You know, I'm also I'm looking forward to this as well. Just for the audience, could you walk us through your background?
Yes, I actually have been helping people become freed from stuck for several decades, and I've been doing that through counseling, coaching, and hypnosis, as well as writing and speaking. So I use various avenues to help people accomplish becoming freed from stuck.
That's amazing. So looking at your background, you have a very strong technical background with a master's degree in education, and you are a certified sex therapist and also certified life coach, business coach, and you're doing all these incredible things. But the first thing that caught my mind is hypnosis. It's a really interesting conversation, really interesting topic. So I'd love to start there. Could you talk about what is hypnosis and how people can benefit from it?
I say to people, sometimes people say, I'm not sure I can be hypnotized. And I say to them, do you watch TV? And they go, well, yeah. I said, then you've been hypnotized.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. Hypnosis is really an altered state of consciousness. It's just going into a relaxed, receptive state. And the benefit of hypnosis is that it allows us to go more deeply into the mind to access information at the non-conscious level and to be able to address it directly with less defensiveness. Now, that being said, people need to really appreciate that no hypnotist can make you do anything that you don't want to do. You're not going to do anything that's contrary to your value system. It's a safe environment in which you allow someone to speak directly to your non-conscious mind in order to give specific directives or instructions with regard to what needs to happen, usually within some kind of change process.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you're saying that you won't do anything that you wouldn't normally do, but let's just say hypothetically you're a bad person, you are about to commit some sort of felony. Could you use hypnosis to have them kind of tell you they're about to do it, or does that not exist?
I don't know. I've not worked at all in that kind of arena with hypnosis. I would doubt that it's not like truth serum. It really is. I mean, it's used obviously for entertainment in some ways, but true clinical hypnotherapy is really for the process of change and healing at that deeper level. And so I can't answer that question. I don't know if that would be possible. I would be inclined to think probably not.
Got it. I mean, that was just straight from a science fiction kind of standpoint. I'm not
Yeah,
at all knowledgeable at this
yeah, I
standpoint.
love it. I love it. Yeah, it's a great question, but I don't have a good answer for it.
So, kind of going deeper into that, you talked about the healing aspect of hypnosis. Could we talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, it is especially helpful in terms of working with fear or anxiety or trauma. And there are certain ways that you can work with the mind at that level to be able to go into memories and alter a person's relationship with that memory. It's not that you actually alter the memory, but you can go in and work with the mind in a way that a person is able to remember an event they can even remember how they felt, but that trauma or anxiety or fear is not actually reactivated in the memory. In other words, they recall it. It's not that it's wiped out, but that it's not triggered in the nervous system in the same way.
That's really interesting. Okay. So they don't necessarily forget about it, it's just that they change how they respond to that memory.
Yes, exactly. And it's about really being able to gain a distance from the memory in such a way that they're not caught into or absorbed into the intensity of the negative emotion.
Got it. Okay, that is so interesting. So, just because this is a business podcast, I do want to shift the conversation a little bit from using what we just talked about from to, I guess, a business context. I know psychology and hypnosis, all of that is very prominent in marketing and also finance, but you work with business clients. How does hypnosis play a role with how you're able to coach your clients, or does it not play a role whatsoever?
It does, depending on what the need of the client is. Often people will come to me with regard to challenges in their business, and I always start with looking at where the origin of that challenge is. And more often than not, it's inside the person, it's not in the structure of the business. So if they're not accomplishing something, there's usually some belief or fear or past historical experience that is interfering with them being able to make effective decisions or take effective action. So I really want to work with someone to explore those places where there are those obstacles or those blocks, and then to be able to go in, sometimes with hypnosis, if that makes sense, to help reframe some of those experiences internally in the mind.
So you're saying it's all from inside the person. So what can, just for our audience to, I guess, actionable steps, how can we use hypnosis to, I guess, better ourselves for our business?
It can be used uh, some sometimes the way that I will work with a client is that I will actually have a talking session with them, much like the conversation that we're having here, to identify really what the challenge is. So, for example, if they're having difficulty, say, with procrastination, so we talk about that, and we really explore what that's about. Why are you not doing what you would like to be able to be doing, or why are you resisting doing something that you know you need to? And so we would explore that. And then after that consultation, I actually record an MP3, a hypnotic MP3, and I send it to them. And then they can listen to that on a daily basis, and they can also use it as an ongoing resource to use in the future. So I have been in the last several years actually be working with hypnosis more in that way rather than just doing, say, a one-time session with them, because very often I find that that isn't as effective, that the repetition of being able to reinforce that at an unconscious level is really, really useful.
Oh, that's the same thing with anything in life, right? You go to the gym one time, you're not going to become fit, or you eat a salad one time, you're not going to get fit, right? So I love that you create an MP3 just so they can have that consistency, that habit
Yeah.
of getting back into it. So out of curiosity, what is in this MP3, this magical MP3?
What's in the MP3? Well, it depends on what they present to me. So I actually personalize it to whatever is going on for them. So, for example, sometimes people are procrastinating just simply because they are overwhelmed. Like it's just like one too many more pieces for them to manage. And so part of what they need to be able to do is work more effectively with their inner state, to be able to relax, to focus, to be able to look at the responsibilities that they're carrying and be able to reprioritize. Sometimes it means they need to bring on additional support in the business for whatever reason. But I really work with that internal piece for them to identify specifically what it is that may be keeping them from taking that next step.
Got it. Okay, that's extremely interesting. So let's move on to the next side of your business. I know hypnosis and counseling is one aspect. Now, what do you do specifically with businesses from a holistic standpoint?
Do you mean in terms of actually working with the businesses themselves?
I mean the owners, the students, or your clients that you coach.
In terms of coaching them in terms of their business development?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I really work primarily in my work with regard to the internal processes. So I don't necessarily work with people in terms of developing plans or strategies per se, business wise. That really isn't my forte. And there are other people out there that have more expertise in those areas that can help with budgeting and strategic planning and um, cultivation of employee relationships, all of those other pieces. I don't really work with that. I really work with people in terms of their own individual well-being. So we talk about often things that are important for us in terms of our well-being, in terms of management of time, of health, of relationships, of um, nutrition and exercise, meditation, all of those opportunities that we have to support our functioning at the highest level at any given point in time.
Got it. Okay. So you listed off a handful of things that you help with for these individuals. Would we able to, or would you be open to walk down each one of these, kind of give some problems that you typically see and some solutions that may be a potential fit for those listening? So, for example, time management. What are some typical problems you see with time management?
Typical problems, I think, with time management tend to be, particularly if people are high achievers, they often do not have a realistic relationship with time, meaning that they can set themselves up with trying to accomplish too much too fast. And then what happens is they find themselves procrastinating or they're not following through on responsibilities because they're just so overextended. So, part of what I really encourage people to do in their business is to, as much as possible, is to relax into it because we have to be able to focus to make good decisions. And we don't make good decisions from a place of anxiety or anger. Those are the worst times for us to make decisions, or fatigue. It's just not a good time to make decisions for our business or any aspect of our life. So, part of what I really want people to be able to do with regard to time is to slow it down in their own minds, meaning for them to slow down their relationship with time. And there are any number of ways that we can structure that. One of the things that I find is really helpful I use, for example, in my own planning, Mondays are my preparation day. And on Mondays, I try not to schedule very many appointments or responsibilities, but I will actually review where my priorities are and I will set out those priorities throughout the week into my calendar. And I will shift them as I can in terms of if I feel like there's imbalance in my calendar for the day. And I always also compare that with regard to what my short term and long term goals are. Now, I don't do that every week, but every week I do set out those week priorities. And then what I have in front of me is I have a map for how I'm going to pace myself through the week. And particularly, I find personally when I'm really excited about something, I tend to overschedule myself. So I have to be really careful about that. The other thing that I always put on my calendar first is I always schedule play first. And I encourage people to do that because, particularly if we're entrepreneurs or we own our own business, It is so easy for our business to absorb our time and energy and focus 24/7. And so, what we're really doing in having the freedom of our own business is we also want to be able to have the quality of life that we want. Well, in order to do that, we have to be able to enjoy the things that are most important for us. So I always sit down in the week and I always plan out my playtime first, as much as possible. And then I plan my work around that. And that really helps me stay focused. It helps me be a little bit more lighthearted. It helps me not take myself so seriously. And it keeps my life flowing more easily. And um, I'm not losing energy unnecessarily by trying to keep up a pace that's not realistic for me.
That's really amazing that you said schedule playtime. The first time I actually heard that, it's from a book called The Now Habit. I'm not sure if that's where you got it from too, but it's really interesting because us as humans, if I tell you, hey, you have a week to clean your house, you're not going to do it until literally the last day. But if I'm like, you have 20 minutes, you're going to knock it out. So by scheduling playtime, that's exactly what happens. So you know that at 4 o'clock you have an event to get to, so you finish everything you can before then instead of dragging it on until 9 p.m. So 100% mirror that with you. That is such a
Yes,
great piece of advice.
so true. Well, think about it. If you have a vacation coming up, you get like more work done that week before vacation, right? Because you're anticipating that time when you're not going to be working and you're excited, hopefully, about the breakaway. And so it's amazing how much you can get done when your mind is in that framework with regard to the anticipation of really doing something that you enjoy.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for sharing that. And something which stuck out was you mentioned to slow time down. You said Mondays you try not to have meetings, and coincidentally, that's exactly what I started doing a few months ago. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I try my best not to have meetings. Hence, we're recording this podcast on a Thursday, right? It's so deep work from Saturday through Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday are just in my meetings. It's kind of like my vacation days slash social days where no guilt because I know I don't plan to get anything done deliverable wise, but I will be in meetings pretty much all day. So I don't know. It seems like you and I are on the same page with how we run our businesses.
Yes, and I find that when I compress the time in that way, like I know I'm working these days and maybe they're a little bit longer and it's more compressed. It's true that those days, the end of those days, I may be a little bit more fatigued, but my mind really likes that because I know then that I have these other blocks of free time that I can really enjoy and invest in things that I want to do. And like you said, I don't have to feel anxious or guilty or preoccupied about that because I know that when I'm working well. Like I'm using that time, I'm focused, and I'm accomplishing what I need to accomplish at that time.
That's absolutely right. So let's move on to the next thing that you mentioned, which was health. What are some common problems that you see with your clients, and what are some possible fixes for those problems?
This may sound a bit simplistic, but I think one of the greatest challenges is breathing. And I don't say that lightly. We tend to, when we are more anxious, we tend to breathe more shallow. And it's fatiguing to our body and it doesn't allow us to be able to relax and take in the oxygen and to rest into where we're at. And so part of what I really encourage people to do is to take breaks and take deep breaths and allow themselves to relax. Um, I have a personal practice and I have colleagues as well that I think it's so important in terms of setting a tone for the day is that I actually do cold therapy every morning. And by that, I mean I take a ice cold shower every morning, first thing when I get up. And I've recommended it numerous times to people, including my own trainer. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. But I will tell you that it really has transformed my health in the sense of that when I get up in the morning, I don't even think about it. I get up, I head straight to that cold shower, and I do 2.5 to 3 minutes in that cold shower. I am working my way up to 5 minutes. I think that's really ideal. Um, but what it does is it stimulates your body, it activates your immune system, it causes your mind to go into alert. You breathe more deeply, so you're getting more oxygen into your body, and it's just a really um, healthy way to start the day. And so for me, that is one technique that I use every day, and I love it. The other way that I will sometimes use cold therapy is, for example, if I've had like a pretty strenuous workout and I have inflammation in my body, I will do cold shower therapy to bring down inflammation in my body. And I have found that to work really, really well. So it's a simple technique. Everybody, at least everybody where you have access to cold water. I know there have been times when I've been like in Arizona or Florida, and their water doesn't get as cold there as it does in Colorado. And so it's like, you call this a cold shower? This isn't a cold shower. So, but if people have access to that, it's a really great way to support your health.
I really need to get on that. You're probably the 10th person to tell me this, and I'm like, all right, I'm just like your trainer and everyone else. I make every excuse not to do it, but I got to push myself to do it.
Yeah. And once you get into it, my husband, I started, I think a year and a half before him. And first time he got in, he was like, he calls it, I was squealing like a girl. I was like, yeah, you kind of were squealing like a girl. And now he's doing way past 3 minutes a day himself, and he loves it. So you work your way into it. And I think that's really important because the task is not to torture yourself in the morning. It really is about learning how to focus and breathe into that and really feel the control that you have in your body because you're choosing that stress. You're choosing to build a resilience in your body, and that it feels really great. So I encourage you to try to take those first steps.
Of course. And you're not the first person on the show to talk about the breathing techniques, and it's interesting. Every time I talk to someone about breathing, I notice my own breath and I really just slow down on the spot. It's just the fact you brought up breathing. While you're talking, I'm just breathing
Yeah,
in, breathing out. Not sure anyone else in the audience is doing the exact same thing, but that's incredible. And I really do appreciate you sharing that with the health sides. They're saying taking breaks, relaxing, cold showers, kind of just slowing down your mind so you can be more alert for the rest of the day.
absolutely.
That's great. So now let's move on to the next bucket, relationships. Tell me about some of the common problems you see and some possible solutions.
Very often people who own their own businesses have a strong internal design of enjoying power. Like that's a need that they have. And so part of the way that that need can be met is in having a successful business. So if we have gone out into the marketplace and we have created something that is successful and prosperous and purposeful, whatever our values are around creating that business, we can have the pleasure of experiencing power in that. However, sometimes one of the greatest challenges for successful people in powerful businesses is that they go home to a relationship where power is negotiated very differently. And so that can be one of the greatest challenges for people in business who go home and they do not know how to show up from a place of mutuality because they have been meeting that need in the workplace, which is it's an appropriate need, but it does not work well with intimacy. It does not work well with companionship. It does not work well with mutuality. And so people who are driven and active in business in that way really have to arrive in their relationships from a different place inside of them. And those people who are really successful about letting go of that need and coming into a relationship for the purpose of mutuality and companionship, when they have a satisfying relationship at home, their work thrives. It is much harder to thrive in business if the relationship at home is not satisfying. And so both are important and they're cultivated in different ways. And so to be able to understand that and make that adaptation in those two often different environments is really important. And if two people who have high power needs come into a relationship, if they are able to negotiate that well, they can create teamwork and really be successful. But often, two partners that have high power needs really struggle because um, there's this need for control and this need for domination in power, and it's just it's a natural instinct. But if two people are really high in those values, it can be really challenging for a relationship.
Thank you for sharing that. One word which you kept saying stuck out to me. It's negotiating. Could you talk a little bit more about negotiating power in this context?
Yes, sometimes in our personal relationship, we do not appreciate that true power relationally, even in business, is about cultivating an environment of trust and care and kindness. And sometimes in our personal relationships, it's where we are less attentive to that. Like we think it's okay to be in our personal relationships in a different way than how we would say treat our colleagues or our coworkers. And so part of what is important and essential in negotiation is asking, if I make this choice in relationship with my partner, is this choice going to cause me to be closer to my partner or farther away? Is my partner going to feel supported in this choice? Or is there going to be more distance or a sense of rejection or not understanding or appreciating my partner? So, our task as individuals is to ask those questions about the choices I'm making in relationship with my partner. How am I showing up? And the negotiation, then, which sometimes is not easy, but the negotiation is to be able to come together and find a place where we can cultivate trust so that we can be honest about our needs and that we can respond from a place of listening and attentiveness and kindness. We can honor the feelings that we may have, which might be about hurt or anger or disappointment, dealing with difficult challenges such as betrayal or dishonesty. Those are much tougher. But in general, just in our day to day experiences with our partners, to be able to be attentive to how is my choice going to be impacting my partner is really, really important in navigating around those speed bumps, those times when you want to be right, or those times when you think something's snarky, or those times when you want to prove that you know better, or whatever it is. We all have impulses, those instincts, and our capacity to be able to modulate those and to understand the importance of our choices is really essential in terms of having happy, mature, well functioning relationships.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So it's about supporting one another, building that trust, holding each other without I guess expressing that dominance. I'm more important than you, or that kind of feeling that you talked about earlier with that workplace, right? It's coming home to a completely different environment, different stakeholders, and I think that's very important. And so by having a healthy relationship at home, it can help you have a better business overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the research really backs that. It really does back that, that those people who have good relationships at home, it allows them to function in their businesses much better because they're happy. They're happy in the places that really count for us, in our relationships, our most intimate relationships.
Absolutely. So I guess the last bucket, which you mentioned before we get into a different part of the show, is talked about nutrition and exercise. Could you talk about some of the issues you see and some solutions for that?
Yes. I think probably one of the greatest challenges that many of us face has to do with how sedentary our work can be. And that is one of the greatest challenges. This is something that I am constantly working with myself because all of my work since the pandemic has gone virtual. And so I am sitting in front of a camera like this for hours every day. And that can be very stressful on the body. Or if I'm writing or if I'm creating a project or something, I am sitting at a computer, I'm sedentary. And the greatest challenge for me is that I get absorbed into a project and I lose track of time and then I don't realize what has happened. So a very practical thing that I have done is setting alarms on my phone so that like every 50 minutes I get up and I move around, I take a short walk. I do something to keep my body active and moving. Another piece that I think is really important in terms of my encouragement with business owners is it's really, really important that you get adequate sleep. We don't talk a lot about that, and particularly for those of us who love our work and we can work and work and work and enjoy that. The sleep is really important for the rejuvenation of the body and of the mind with regard to relaxing our nervous system, regenerating our brain, getting oxygen flowing throughout our body is really important in terms of our effectiveness in showing up in the workplace.
As much as I love sleep, it's almost like I'm making an excuse to sleep more because I love sleep. So I try to make the excuse. I'm like, great, I'm gonna sleep in because I need it to function. I do actually see a giant reduction in my productivity when I don't sleep, and so I definitely agree with that. Do you know much, or would you be able to talk a little bit more about the sleep side of it? What happens, I guess, when is it possible to get too much sleep, or is that not really a thing?
I'm not a sleep expert, so I can't address that from a level of expertise
Got it.
in that area. But what I can say is that if people are sleeping excessively, it probably means that there is something going on for them, either physically, biochemically, or emotionally, where they are. It can be something such as depression. Often, people who are uh, in grief will sleep more just because their body needs that rest in the grieving process, but it can sometimes be an indicator of depression because people are just kind of wanting to escape. They're just overwhelmed and they want to sleep. So in terms of if you're functioning well, I don't know that there would be it wouldn't make sense to me that the body would sleep too much. Like your body knows how much rest it needs. And different people have different needs. I mean, statistically, they say you should have 8 hours of sleep. Some people need 10, and some are fine on 6. So I think finding whatever that is for us in terms of optimal um, functioning is really good, and then really protecting that. But I don't know that there, if you're sleeping too much, there it's an indicator that there's something that is out of balance.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for being honest about your about sleep and your experience with that from a scientific standpoint. I appreciate that. So I want to switch the gears a little bit and talk more about your company, Freed from Stuck. Tell us more about what it is.
Well, Free from Stuck is really it came out of when I wrote my book several years ago. I had not really intended on ever writing a book, but I had a colleague who encouraged me to do that. And when we sat down to talk about what I might write about, what I came to realize is that for all of these many decades, that's what I've been doing in my work. And so it really became foundational for me in developing this process. The Freed is actually we use the FREED as an acronym in the book for the 5 essential components that are necessary to become freed from stuck. And when I realized that it was something that I really wanted to make available to people, to understand that these 5 components are necessary not only to make change and to get free from stuck, but to stay freed from stuck. And so this has really kind of been my mission, my excitement about sharing this understanding to really help people be able to move forward, both personally and professionally.
Got it. So you mentioned FREED stood for something. What did what does it stand for?
It is actually, I used a metaphor of crossing the bridge from stuck to freed from stuck. And so F is face the bridge. And this is about identifying what I call is the real problem, which is about a pain point or an unmet need that has not been attended to. So the first task is to really identify what is that? What is the pain? What is the unmet need? R is recognize the bridge. And what this is actually looking across the bridge to the other side and determining, well, how do I want my life to be different? What needs to change? And if I make that change, what's it going to look like? And this is really where we cultivate a vision that magnetizes us across the bridge. The more vivid it is, the more emotionally charged it is, the more it fuels us to be able to make the journey to becoming freed from stuck. The E, the first one is embrace the bridge. And what this is about identifying all of the blocks and obstacles, both externally and internally, that may be keeping me from moving forward. And then putting together a strategic plan that's realistic and manageable that's going to get me where I want to go. The second E is exit the bridge. And what this is about is an element that we don't talk about very often, but it is the element of grief. That anytime we make a change, it's going to require that we let go of something that's no longer serving us. And when we let go of something, even if we willingly let go of it, we're still going to grieve it because it had value to us. And I always say to people, there's no more difficult task for human beings than grieving. And to the depth that we love is the depth of our grief. So when we're attached to something, we need to be able to anticipate that if we are going to let go of a person, a relationship, a setting, a pattern, we are going to need to attend to the grief of that in order to be able to move forward. Otherwise, sometimes we're tempted to retreat back to what is familiar, not necessarily comfortable, but familiar. And then D is discovering the destination and discovering our destiny while we're arriving at the destination. And by that, I mean, anytime we go through a transformation process, a change process, it has the potential for us to discover more of who we really are, what our values are, what's important to us, what brings us joy, what brings us passion, and what is purposeful in our life. So every time we move from stuck to freed from stuck, we have this opportunity of getting more clarity about our destiny, meaning who we really are. So it's not just about arriving where we think we want to be, but it's really also about discovering more of who we are and how amazing that can be in the journey. The other thing that's so important to keep in mind is that whenever we cross the bridge, there will always be another bridge and another bridge and another bridge, because that's how life works. Those places where we are stuck are those opportunities for our growth and our expansion.
Thank you so much for going through that. I'm really excited to read your book. It's all this is laid out in there with all the details and examples. And so when you're talking about after you cross a bridge, there's going to be another bridge. Is it possible to go through that bridge quicker by using lessons learned from the previous bridge, or is it still going to take the same process?
No, that's the beauty about understanding these elements. It's like, oh, I get it. I know how to build another bridge. I know how to cross this bridge more easily. I know what to anticipate. And so it really is wonderful, because if you have this understanding of this framework, you can apply it to any situation where you're stuck, whether it's personal or professional. And so that's the beauty of really developing the skill of crossing that bridge. So it really allows us to be able to move more easily. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy, but it allows us to do it more easily.
Wonderful. Well, now let's get into the last part of this show. So first of all, thanks so much for everything. Outside of your own book, what is your favorite book that you would recommend to this audience?
Ooh, I'll tell you the first book that comes to mind, and it's probably because we're talking about the process of change. But one of the finest resources that I believe is available is Atomic Habits,
James
where he
Clear, such a great book.
oh, it's an amazing book. I think honestly, it's probably the best book that I have read on habit and pattern formation and change. It's an excellent resource, and so yeah, I love that book. It's very well done.
Awesome. Well, for the audience, could you talk a little bit more about the book?
Oh, it's been a little while since I've actually read it. What I appreciated about it was that he really breaks down what happens for us in the change process and how our physiology and our brain and our nervous system works with change. And I appreciated that about the book, because he really encourages people to know that change is not something that we readily or easily choose. Like, we prefer to stay with what's most comfortable, but we choose to stay with what's most comfortable because that's the way we're designed. We're designed to conserve energy, and it's part of our survival instinct. And so we stay with what's familiar, we stay with what's comfortable, we stay with what we know. What happens, however, is that as we grow and mature and expand and have more life experience, the things that once worked for us don't work any longer. And so we realize we have to make changes. And that's then when we have to look at what is I frame it a bit differently in the change process that he does, but it's the same principle of what is the next most simple step I can take to create change. And particularly if I can attach that simple change onto something that's already established, that's the easiest way to gain momentum in the change. So, for example, you brush your teeth every day and you say, but I really should start flossing my teeth every day. Well, if you attach the flossing to brushing your teeth every day, it's going to be a lot more easy than if you say, I need to make time some other time in the day to floss my teeth. It's not going to happen. But if you connect it to a habit that's already established, it makes it much easier to develop that habit consistently, and then it just becomes part of the pattern. And I really love the way he educates about that process in the book.
That's absolutely right. Actually, using that flossing example, I remember in the book he says to build that habit of actually specifically flossing, he says just floss one tooth a day. That's
Ah,
it. And then the next day, floss two teeth. That's it. And so that way you start having this urge. It's like, okay, I'm already started, but I can only do one. All right. So that way you're slowly building that habit until you're doing your entire mouth. And
yeah,
I think that's incredible. Well, Susie, it's been an incredible honor having you as a guest. Where can our audience get in touch with you?
the easiest way to get in touch with me is my website, and you just can go to freedfromstuck.com. And there's lots of information there. If you're interested in a consultation, you can contact me through there. And I just encourage people to go there. There's blogs and articles, all kinds of stuff that might be useful for you.
Awesome. I'll link all this in the show notes. Susie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It has been a delight. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.